Inside I give thanks and the highest praise. Ground myself to Mama Earth, connect out the space.
Hello and welcome. It is number 17 in a long-running saga of Sunday streams, which is brilliant. Thank you so much for joining and for being here already in the chat room. There's a whole bunch of people already in here. Martin Taylor, thank you very much for being first. Keith in Watford, Native VS, Paul Artola. I will go through them all when a few more people have joined in, which is really cool. What else has been going on? We've been doing a bunch of Clownfest stuff, so that's good this week. I've put out a few more videos which are worth a watch, including the Clownfest set. If you haven't seen it, that seems to go down pretty well. But all of this pales into insignificance when we realise who we have on today. This guy has kind of got the triumvirate of achievements going on here. He was in 9 Inch Nails, which would be good enough for a start. And then he moved into film and kind of film and music for film and TV, but not in a kind of half-assed way. He did it kind of for, American Horror Story and for Saw and things like that. And then he's just released his own sound library for Spitfire, who are just the number one sound library people for film and that kind of stuff, with a percussion library, which is just epic. But we're not really here to plug that, to be honest, as much as I would love to plug it for him. He just got in touch off the back of Sonic State and said, I'd love to come on and talk about stuff. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Charlie Clouser. How are you today, sir?
Hi, everyone. I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. And thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. I mean, we have all sorts of weird and wonderful people on, and I think you have one of the most interesting backgrounds that we have, which is amazing. I mean, we're only run for about an hour, which is good. So please, anyone in the chat that's interested in asking any questions whatsoever, whether it's being in a kick-ass stadium-filling band with amazing synth sounds and hardcore guitars, through to doing film music and so forth for what I guess in general are fairly scary films. Would that be free to say?
Yeah, if the word death appears in the title, that's usually gets slid under my door.
I mean, the music is vital in any film. I was going to say, because it's so much more important in horror films, but the tension created by the music, in particular in horror films, is so vital, and it is so intrinsically part of the whole thing. I guess, can we start there? How on earth, when you've watched the same scene kind of 1,000 times, where the thing goes or whatever and everyone's meant to jump, how on earth can you keep the objectivity to know what kind of a sound you're meant to be making at that time?
Well, it's, horror movies have a great there's a great love from the fans for both insane sound design and crazy scary ambiences and all that, but also for themes. And whether it's Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells stuff from the original Exorcist to the Halloween themes and all the John Carpenter stuff, there's, in a way that's kind of rare in a lot of movies, those melodic themes and kind of almost with a pop song sensibility become like a memorable and important part of the soundscape, and almost in some ways like another character in the movie. And so that's hugely gratifying and encouraging for anyone that's like me, that came from a song-based, album-based kind of background.
Right.
That you can still have, it doesn't just have to be these washes of scary noise, that you can here and there inject a melody which will become kind of memorable and become, if you're lucky, sort of an extra character, a supporting character in the cast.
Right. And your background, I tried to catch up a little bit more about you pre 9 Inch Nails. Your background was very originally as a drummer, right?
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because moving, I don't know, I mean, Stuart Copeland's the obvious example of a killer drummer who's gone on to make killer tracks, but there is so much percussion involved in film that I mean, actually, I know you've released the library for Spitfire, but the Spitfire percussion and drum libraries are kind of the things you hear all over the place in films once you've tried them out, which I did. It's like, oh yeah, I recognize that.
Right.
And I think that's such an advantage if you're a really good drummer to start with, you know, so the melodies are almost less important. How do you work your way around those too?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Stuart Copeland, because the very first job I ever had being paid actual money to make music, other than playing in crap bands in high school or whatever, was working with an Australian composer in the 1980s who had been hired to take over scoring the original TV series The Equalizer on CBS back in the 80s, which the theme and the first few seasons were scored by Stuart.
Oh right, okay,
Remember?
wow. So you picked up his mantle, if
Exactly.
you like.
And I was kind of the number 3 man on a 3-man team, but it was great. I was, at a tender young age, fresh out of college, and that allowed me to see kind of how the sausage gets made and see the workflow and the musical demands in that kind of environment. And of course, we were working in a pre-established framework that Stuart had sort of set up. So we came in for the final season of this show. But it was great because we weren't inventing the wheel from scratch, but I also got to see the mechanics behind meeting a deadline with 42 minutes of music every week, 26 weeks in a row. So
wow. Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask about deadlines. I mean, I did a set for an online festival this week, and I've worked out that I kind of have to leave it till the last minute to do it, because otherwise I take up all the available time, no matter how much time there is, whether it's 2 days or 2 months. It will take me that length of time. So to get a bit of life back, I can't push it down the road. That's
exactly what you just said. It kind of encapsulates one of the few mantras that I absorbed from this Australian composer from back in the 80s that I worked with, who had these great sort of soundbite kind of phrases. And one of my favorites that I still quote to this day was, he said, Work is a gaseous state. It will always expand to fill all the available space."
Exactly.
So there's
100%.
no such thing as sort of being ahead of the game, because you'll never finish early. It'll always be a panic right up until the last possible second. And so he was saying this sort of as a way of saying, so just relax. We're going to be in a panic, so don't let it get to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it was interesting. I worked for a long time with outside of music, actually, briefly with a guy he set up Maxim magazine in the US. So the most incredible magazine, the most successful, and he was all about deadlines. It's like if that thing doesn't get to print or to the printers and then to print, and so there would be this huge push right up to the edge of the cliff, and then by that it was done. It was gone out the window. Yeah. And we were working on some media and musical projects where you could push the deadline, and it was such an anathema to him. So it wasn't film. It wasn't like you have this release date. It was like, let's make an album. Okay, we're going to put it out next summer. You know what I mean? Let's see how it goes. And this it was like he couldn't compute. It had been so ingrained on him that by Tuesday of next week that thing is arriving on the back of a bus. In the printers.
Well, I've had good fortune or bad fortune to work on both sides of that deadline situation, because of course in the context of working with Nine Inch Nails, the deadlines they existed, but they were inevitably pushable and flexible, and it was kind of all up to when Mr. Reznor was satisfied with the product. And so we legendarily spent epic amounts of time on one particular album, which took years, and that was a case of the original deadline was lost in the shuffle like long ago.
Wow.
And it wound up being, multiple years past
and
our
that
original
was
prediction.
Actually the time you were in the band, wasn't it? What's the name of the album? Sorry, it's not Tragedy.
That was the album. That was the album, The Fragile.
Fragile. Sorry, yes.
Which was the fourth project, and I had worked some with the band in the studio during the final stages of the previous album, The Downward Spiral.
Yeah.
And then there was a long touring cycle on the back of that, where I was playing keyboards in the live band. And then we sort of moved. We moved to New Orleans for some reason, and Trent built this gigantic studio in what had been a funeral home. This enormous freaking building. But it was great because we built a huge SSL room that was his primary studio. We had room for the band to rehearse in, and a big live room, and a B studio. And then each member of the band had our own little private programming rooms upstairs.
Wow.
So it was kind of this great nexus of creativity. And of course, when you have few limitations logistically, then the time limitations start to become blurry too.
I mean, that's a budget and a half, right? Wow, those were the days.
We burned up some cash for sure.
Wow.
But it afforded us I'm super grateful to have been able to be involved in the I don't know if it was the waning years, but the years of big money and big iron and big gear and big productions.
Totally.
And we did have the opportunity to bring in people like Steve Duda, who the creator of this fantastic Serum synth plugin, who was originally a tech support. He was like a high-level tech support guy at DigiDesign, which of course was the company that made Pro Tools before it was swallowed up by Avid. And so as a result, he was somebody that I would speak to fairly regularly, because my gig in Nails was kind of making sure all the high-tech stuff was working up to expectations. So I wound up talking to Steve quite frequently, and eventually it became a case of, hey, why don't we see if we can convince this guy to quit his job at DigiDesign and move to New Orleans and become our in-house
man, it was
expert.
You. My word,
Yeah.
I saw a fantastic YouTube video where he was doing like a masterclass, an interview on stage, and I'll link it after this. I can't remember where it was, and it described this. I was doing some tech support, didn't go into detail, and I kind of talked to a few people and made the jump, and then it's the process of how he did it and what he learned from that whole experience. But that's fantastic that you were part of that.
He's
because
such a talent,
Serum
and
is just incredible.
It is. And I've done, I have, like everybody, have tons of hardware synths and every plugin and soft synth known to mankind.
Yep.
And Serum continually is at the top of the heap for pure sonics.
Yeah.
And the sound of the filters and just the girth and the weight of the sounds that come out of it. So, he deserves every ounce of success that Serum has had.
He's got the right balance between not getting too techie about it. Do you know what I mean? And it's you see this a lot, because I'm quite technical and I produce software and stuff, but you can be too technical. You've got to be the musician first and use people to write, but just be technical enough to get the respect out of the tech team. Actually, funnily enough, the worst thing you want is to have a team of techs that go, oh, that idiot's here again and he wants us to change that oscillator. What? Do you know what I mean? He's going on, I can't hear a difference myself. You've got to instigate some kind of respect, but yeah, it's perfect. And the way he was describing how he got people involved in doing the oscillators, it's just fabulous and so far ahead of its time for us to be talking about that now, where there's been no fundamentally humongous changes in the overall architecture of the whole thing, and it's been improved.
Exactly.
Just incredible.
I mean, I had a shootout at the beginning of the scoring for, I don't know if it was this last Saw movie or the one before it, but I was determined to do a shootout to find the best possible device to do the most basic of synthesizer sounds, just literally a sort of just a nice, long, girthy analog synth sweep. And I tried every piece of hardware in the room. And of course, the Minimoog Model D reissue was right at the front of the pack. And the only soft synth that could even hold a candle to what the Minimoog does for this most basic of sounds was Serum. And so what wound up in the final mix for the movie was 4 tracks of the Minimoog in mono, but panned into quad, so that it had this lovely sort of enveloping surround. And then Serum in stereo up the front speakers. And it was an interesting little shootout. And I was quite pleased to find that Serum kind of was the winner.
Yeah,
second
absolutely.
only to the mighty Minimoog.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you tend to use as many VSTs as possible simply for the recallability of stuff now on synths? On films?
Yeah, although even though I have sort of a, heritage, reputation, background as a synth guy, in my scores, I actually wind up using very few synths or synth sounds. And it's mostly manipulated audio. Whether it's orchestral samples that have been pitched down or weird atonal, aleatoric, orchestral sounds that have been granulated or time stretched or whatever. I tend to lean more towards things that have an acoustic footprint or DNA. And that was, again, that's sort of my natural tendency, but there was a great moment when on one of my first TV series that I ever scored, which is sort of a buddy cop series called Fastlane many years ago. And I had this, it was the first time I was in the driver's seat on a weekly series all by myself. And I had these fancy cues with lots of tricky synth work, and it wanted to have a sort of up to the minute and kind of almost urban R&B aspect to some of the cues. And I had these fancy synth sounds bleeping and blooping away. And the showrunner, as we were reviewing some of the cues, said he kept stopping the playback and saying, "What's that sound? That R2D2? What's that C3PO sound?" And and I realized that some of these, what we as musicians or as people who make records would think is really, nifty and cool, and we want to pack in all the latest up to the minute sounds. In a scoring context, those can often be distracting and call attention to themselves, and therefore draw the viewer's attention away from paying attention to the damn story.
Right. Yes.
And in the course of that discussion, he said, why don't you have these cool like electric pianos and organs and stuff in those other cues? Why don't you just use some of that? And of course, my first reaction would be, I'm not going to use those boring normal old sounds. Like, what are you talking about? I spent all night on this filter sequence or whatever it was. But it was a good piece of input from the non-tech side. And although I didn't necessarily consider it a life lesson at the time, it's kind of been borne out in my experience in doing movies that things that start with an acoustic footprint, even if you time stretch them and granulate them and just wreck them, they still kind of have a familiarity to the human ear in
like
a way
an organicness.
Exactly.
Missing, yeah.
In a way that like a Skrillex ultra complex dubstep wub filter sequence might be too. I mean, there's a place for both, but I always temper my judgment with things that can sound outrageous but still comfortable or familiar. If
Got you. That's
sense,
so interesting because our ears are kind of used to imperfection, right, or movement at least. So when you've got this, even if you've got a synthesizer that adds in a bit of wobbling to the LFO to make it sound more real, it's still a cyclical wobble, isn't it? It's not. There's no. Yeah, that's amazing.
So there's a bit of a mix. I am a huge plug-in hoarder and sample library addict, and my finger is worn down to a nub from hitting the add to cart button. But I stumbled on a thought recently that as I was playing with like the ASM Hydrasynth, which is a relatively inexpensive but very interesting and awesome little synth with polyphonic aftertouch, really great. And I was in some thread on Gearspace or on VI Control or something, and people were endlessly arguing about the benefits of plugins versus hardware synths. And I realized that when a team is developing a hardware synth, they have a much higher barrier to entry and a much higher amount of effort that needs to be expended to bring this product out into the world.
Right.
Compared to a software developer who might be a smaller team, and of course they have less to risk in terms of, they didn't have to commit to manufacturing 10,000 units and have them shipped over from China, whatever. So as a result, there's the possibility that a software-only dev team doesn't have to do as good a job as a hardware dev team does because they have less on the line. And obviously I love buying a new fancy synth for $99 as a plugin that seems on paper to have all the features of something that's a highly evolved product like a Waldorf Quantum, right?
Yes.
But the Rolf and the team at Waldorf have much more of a substantial investment of time, energy, and expertise at risk than a software only dev, and so they've got to get it right.
100%. Yeah, I keep banging on about this to people where, the distribution cost of software is zero. Obviously, there are development costs to anything, and you can spend lots on software development, but the distribution cost is zero, the manufacturing cost is zero. And the ability to just push out an update is trivial, it's I mean, I write plugins from this side, and I did it because it was the easy way out. I'd love to make hardware, but the amount of financial commitment and manufacturing and the idea of getting it wrong. I mean, way back in the old days when you could only ship software on CDs and they were printing these things out, hoping there weren't bugs on it, that was slightly different. But yeah, completely agree. I mean, the move towards kind of, firmware updatable synths makes that a lot easier for some manufacturers, but shipping costs and your kind of being open to the changes in import duties and the exchange rates and stuff, it's an absolute nightmare. Anyway,
There's a good question there from Andrew Brooks, who says,
yes, indeed.
How often does a film score need to be pared back to fit? Is it easy to overload the images with sound? Yes, it is. And yes, they do need to be pared back. And I think, especially for me, who's coming from a background of making overly elaborate records and remixes and pieces of music that wanted to feel like a sonic sculpture, some elaborate, you're building a sculpture replica of the Eiffel Tower out of toothpicks at a 1-to-1 scale. So you have all this intricacy and this fanciness and this high-tech stuff, using all your experience and expertise at manipulating all this equipment and making this fabulous, elaborate thing. And a lot of the time, it's very easy to create something that strays from serving the story and the picture and the action. And it's a constant sense of reevaluation and reduction on my part. Of course, the Saw movies are a little bit of a special, non-typical case, and that the producers and the audience too, for all of them, it's sort of too much is never enough. So, saddle up all the horses.
Right.
But many of my favorite scores that I like are the simplest and most minimal and most effective when they just are doing the least amount of stuff. And there's a composing team named Danny Bensi and Sander Jurians, who I believe work out of New York, and they scored this series, I think it was on Netflix, called Ozark. And they've also scored a few other movies that Jason Bateman, who was the creator of Ozark, had some features that he had done. And their scores are very minimal. And, their percussion track might just be hitting a floor tom on the downbeat, and that's it. But they're very effective, and their sound design and the emotional kind of tension that they were able to conjure up with relatively few sounds and few elements is always, to me anyway, was really effective. And I always love that type of approach, much like what Johan Johansson, rest in peace, had done on Sicario and on this fantastic movie called Prisoners, which was very minimal but very emotional. It had very impactful score. So I'm always trying to back away from the sophistication and the fanciness that all these blinking lights will tempt me to use.
Have you ever been in that nightmare? Andrew Bruce says, thanks very much, and great answer. Absolutely. Have you been in that nightmare situation where you've got a problem understanding the description of sound? So the director will be going, can you make it more blue, for goodness sake? Or, it needs more red in this. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to describe sound. So the ability to communicate is as vital as making the music quite often, right?
That is... if I can go into full self-deprecating mode for a second, I'm not a great musician. There's almost no instrument that I could sit around the campfire and jam out to old Bob Dylan songs with. Maybe a pair of bongos, but what I learned at this freaky liberal arts college that I went to, and what I've just learned through experience, is that being able to communicate with, whether it's a record producer you're working on a record with, or the showrunner or the director or the producers of a film or TV show, is being able to communicate in these sort of non-jargon type of terms, and to be able to speak in civilian language about a topic music, which can have a lot of technicalities and a lot of jargon. So that's never, I kind of enjoy, I'd rather talk about music with a civilian, quote unquote, than with another muso who's going to start talking about chord shapes and stuff and quickly get out of my depth. It's always more fun for me to talk about that kind of thing with the showrunner or the director or producers who, because then we can kind of both find a common ground that lies somewhere in between their understanding of the emotional and story arc aspects of the project and my willingness to talk about whether we used a 12 dB or a 24 dB filter, but somewhere in the middle there is is a common ground where you can talk about, a typical conversation. If they say, oh, this scene feels like it's dragging, inside your head, you're saying, well, that's because that actor can't act, that writer can't write, and that editor can't edit. But of course, you're not going to say that. But you can lead the discussion down a friendly side street. Right. And if they say this scene feels like it's dragging, what do you think we could do to help it? And of course, that kind of puts you on the spot. But a way to steer that conversation would be to say, well, I think if we do need some motion and a sense of pacing, but we can't have drums because it's just two people talking in a room. But we do need pacing, but it can't be even a Harry Gregson Williams synth pulse because even that is too outdoorsy and actiony for this scene. But we do need a sense of boom, boom, motion, slow motion that maybe will subtly get faster as the scene progresses and they lead to their conclusion when they're going to jump up from their chairs and grab their guns and go and murder everyone. So finding a way to discuss the musical thing that you're going to do or that you hope you're going to do in a way that's in human terms, in civilian language, is a great skill. Yeah. And that's 90% of it sometimes. Then, of course, you have to go back to the studio and go, what did I promise them I was going to do?
No, I mean, wow.
I promised all this great stuff, and now I got to actually do it.
You're the salesman and the musician. I mean, that people watching that what you just said there was an absolute masterclass in how to sell your music, because I was completely, I hadn't even seen the film, this fictitious film you were just discussing, and I completely got the fact that you were solving my problem as the person behind the film or whatever, and it's all about solving problems, right? My slowness is now going to be sorted by this boom, boom, and I get it all, and that's absolute masterclass. Let's move back onto the Nine Inch Nails stuff briefly from Synth Addict. Did you enjoy smashing DX7s on synths on stage as much as Trent did?
Absolutely, because DX7s are just, I know they're experiencing a resurgence. People love the DXED plugin. People are buying old brown DX7s. But to us in the 90s, that was just an anathema. It was just the most wretched, corny, cheesy keyboard that had ever come out. And to see them being so widely used, it was just like, we never used a sound from a DX7 and never would and never will. But because they were so widespread, they were easy to find in any pawn shop in any podunk town while you're on tour. Wow. For $200 or $300. So we'd send the local crew guys, the runners, out from the venue and say, hey, is there any good pawn shops or used music stores in town? Go out. If they have any of brown DX7s, buy as many as you can carry, but don't pay more than $300 for them. Wow. And so they'd bring them back. So we'd carry a few dozen with us on tour because they would bite the dust at a rate of 2 or 3 a night. But I will say they were incredibly durable. They're a beautifully made piece of equipment. They just sound like garbage to me anyway. Yeah. So we quite enjoyed punishing them for their sins against modern music.
What were your synths of the day then back then? What were you actually using on stage?
All of the sounds were being produced by in the first round of touring after the Downward Spiral. All the sounds were coming from Emax 2 rack units. Okay. So the DX7s were just MIDI controllers. Mm-hmm. And then there was 2 sounds that were created by a Prophet VS, which was safely located off stage. the sort of synth solo that Trent plays in the song Happiness and Slavery, which is immediately recognizable as a Prophet VS, sort of an edited and an amended version of the preset called Volcanic, which is this big burly unison wavetable sort of buzzy sound. And the part of the beauty of the DX7s and the Emaxs in combination is that on the Emax and also on later EMU E4 samplers, you could trigger them to load a new bank from hard drive by sending a program change, and you could choose what program change that was. And then, so we set it up so that, the DX7 has those 2 rows of buttons, which will, with one touch, will send a program change. So we set it up so that button 32 replicated the load bank button on the front of the sampler, and then the next program change that you sent would tell it which bank to load. So you could load the bank for a given song by just pushing 32 and then the number of the song that you needed to load. And unlike almost every other synth, which might have like a telephone keypad where you'd have to type 032 enter, 016 enter, you could just push 32, 16, done. And
wow, that's groundbreaking back then. Just incredible.
It was a very unique feature of, like the Akai samplers didn't do that. And no other sampler there probably was, but the ones that we had at the time, the Emaxs and later the E4s, worked that way. And in combination with the DX7 that had these one-touch program buttons, it was a match made in heaven. So we stuck with that combination for years and years.
Wow, I mean that's really astonishing. I mean, and there's a few questions coming back to film, but just before we hit it, I've just popped it up there so we don't forget it. But how did that whole thing kick off with Trent? And also, I mean, without going into too much details, and was it a really enjoyable experience? Was it quite stressful? I get the impression he's quite he owns the project, right? And he could be a hard taskmaster. But also, it's a weird one, right?
I will say that Trent's quality control knob has already been cranked up to 12 and then broken off, so it can't be adjusted downwards. So even if it doesn't matter what it was, whether it was the logo that gets printed onto a sweatshirt to be sold at the gig, or whatever it was, the videos, the artwork for the album, of course, all the musical content and the sound design within it, and the production and engineering and the mixing. He's 100% in control of all that. So it's a bit like, he's the captain of the Titanic, and the rest of us at times felt like we were the guys down in the boiler room shoveling coal. But someone's got to shovel the coal. So
fair enough.
And it was, obviously it's fantastic to work with someone who's that talented and has that singular purity of vision and a clear path. It may not be clear to us at all times what that path is and what that end goal is, but it is to him. So it was always, it was never sort of stressful and, getting yelled at for missing a deadline or doing a lame synth-based sound or whatever. There's never any of that. Of course, you would get a lot of things thrown at you on stage, but that's all in good fun. And that's
brilliant. That is good though. That's live.
In terms of the live band, by the time I joined Nine Inch Nails, I was almost 30. I had already had record contracts and publishing deals and done tours and bands that didn't sell and got dropped, and I was kind of over it. But when I saw what Nine Inch Nails was doing live, and the sheer level of mayhem and violence, I said, now that is something I'll go get back on the horse for something like that. Cool. I wanted the gigs to, I wanted everyone involved, the audience and the band member, to, forget mosh pit. I want to see assault with a deadly weapon. Yeah. I wanted to see blood spilled and teeth knocked out. And that I wanted everyone involved, both the band and the audience, to leave the gig thinking, wow, that was amazing. If I'd known what I was getting into, I would never do that. And I'm glad I did it, but I'd never do it again. I wanted it to be traumatic and life-changing experience as much as close to that as possible. So when I saw the level of destruction and mayhem and Trent tackling other band members on stage, I said, I'll have a piece of that. That looks fantastic,
I mean, it's spectacular. It's just brilliant. And it's an iconic band. You know, if you mention to anybody, even they haven't heard the tunes, it's like
they know what it is. Yeah,
you know, yeah. And that's quite hard. And I love the fact that it's you know, there's a lot of synth involved. You know, synths in general don't fill stadiums, with some very big exceptions like Nine Inch Nails, Depeche Mode, or whatever. Right. But they're not rock unless, but they should be, you know, because they're so thick and wonderful sounding. It's
and he
great,
did a great job at making synths, not necessarily making them cool again, but being able to use them in a very hard and aggressive and like a rock kind of context. You know, as I was getting involved with Nine Inch Nails, I remember saying to one of the other guys, I said, you know, the only other band I would ever have joined would have been Kraftwerk, and they're not hiring. So,
quite. Are you listening to much stuff now in terms of in that ilk outside of films and stuff, or have you listening taste changed?
You know, my casual listening of record-based music is kind of split 50-50, it seems, between endlessly playing old Killing Joke, Public Image Limited, and stuff like that. That was music from my formative years. Yeah. And then searching out one or two nuggets of sonic awesomeness that come out recently. I remember when Deontward first came out, I thought, this is fantastic. This is so punk rock and silly, but at the same time, like, just bold. And that's kind of what always attracts me to music, is whether it's a bold direction that disregards the way you're supposed to do it, you know? And obviously there's a lot of fantastic electronic music coming out in the past 10, 20 years that is very groundbreaking and that I can appreciate from a point of view of, wow, that person really knows how to work the automation lanes in Ableton or whatever. Of course. But then there's some music which is, you know, the music that sticks with me seems to be not necessarily created from a point of technical expertise, but created from coming from an oblique angle of just sonic weirdness and awesomeness.
There's a great quote. You were on Pensado's place, which, guys in the chat, if you haven't looked at it, it's a really cool show. It's been going for ages, and it was something like it's more important to sound new than to sound good. But Nine Inch Nails did both, kind of that kind of thing, you know. Have you ever worked with Chris Kimsey? Just when you mentioned Killing Joke, he was a producer, worked with Rolling Stones and stuff. It's exactly the kind of producer I thought maybe worked with some of the bands who were on, but no, really good.
You know, Killing Joke was so, like, at the time, it just came like it was like a lightning bolt. And again, a lot of it is just the sound of Jazz Coleman's voice and just the wide-eyed terror of him on the mic. And I did actually... You know, I have some cross-pollination with them. One of my oldest friends, a guy named JB, John Bechtel, who is currently the keyboard player in the band Ministry and has been for many years, had also played keyboards in Killing Joke and in some of their side projects like Murder Inc. and stuff like that. Yeah. And I had done some Killing Joke remixes over the years, and I saw them as recently as, I think it was about 2 years ago, and killer as always. Huge Jazz Coleman fan, huge Geordie fan. Just their sonic... And
the stuff that Youth has done as well, you know, in production stuff since... I mean, what a talented group as well. Yeah. Jazz is like... He's moved into orchestral, but I don't know if it's film scores, but moved away to some amazing orchestral work as well. I'm really so glad you love him. Yeah.
Took me by surprise, but just his love of the darkness...
Yeah.
Kind of permeates everything that he does, and it's just, I love it all.
So chaotic. I mean, Chris was the guy that produced Love Like Blood and stuff like that, and I heard a few stories about what it was like, and it was chaos, as you can probably expect, you know.
Good.
And what came out of that was just like, wow, and it sounds so good today as well. Yeah, check out Killing Joke, everyone, if you haven't come across them. Anyone who's late to the party, we're talking to Charlie Clouser, who was with Nine Inch Nails, but more recently has made some amazing horror themes for American Horror Story and the Saw films and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And also has a new percussion-based Spitfire audio sound pack out as well, which you can go and check it out. We'll do a quiz in a while, but there's just so much stuff to talk about. Back in the film score stuff, there's a question I wanted to ask actually, which David Serchek came up with. How much time do you typically have for a score? And if I add to that, was the first one you did was, I don't know how you get into this stuff. So I guess, did you have to kind of jump in on the first one and promise a lot and do it very quickly?
Oh yeah. With the Saw movies generally are not necessarily typical because we were churning them out every year. So it would be this frantic mad dash to get them in the theaters for Halloween, which was like our Halloween weekend was when you count on there being a new Saw movie. I generally, for those, would have between 6 and 8 weeks from, okay, here's the locked cut of the picture, to, we're on the dub stage tomorrow. Do you have any music for us?
Wow.
So the first one, I think I had about 5 weeks. And actually the first Saw movie, I came into working with this franchise through the most diagonal of connections, where I had my music business lawyer that I had worked with for years and years, who had done, would like negotiate my fee for a White Zombie remix or something. Mm-hmm. He was representing James Wan and Lee Wanell, who were the creators and James directed the first Saw movie. And I get this, usually my lawyer, I only speak to him in case there's some emergency or it's my birthday. And so when he called me I was in the middle of recording vocals for the band, for an album by the band Helmet, the album Size Matters, which we were recording all the vocals and overdubs at my house in Hollywood. And I got a call on a Wednesday morning that was definitely not my birthday from my lawyer. And he said, Charlie, it's Jeffrey here. I got a pencil. Take down this phone number. You need to call these guys right away. They have this indie horror movie, and they have a bunch of industrial music in their temp score, including a couple of little fragments of remixes that you've done. They want a non-orchestral, industrial-influenced score for this horror movie. You need to call them right now.
Brilliant.
And I literally said, okay, thanks. I got the number. I'll call him right away, Jeff. And I put down the phone and went back to just finishing comping one more vocal, just 5 minutes. And before that 5 minutes had passed, my lawyer called me back and he said, you haven't called them yet. You need to call them right now. So I did. And within an hour, I was down at their edit bay watching their rough cut of the movie. And, still trying to not like regurgitate my breakfast as I watched this violent movie at 10 in the morning. And by that afternoon, it was a go. And I had about 5 weeks to do it, and I kind of did it in my B room on the small rig, on the rig that was supposed to be just for comping vocals, while they continued recording vocals in the main room, and I just did it all on my little rig in about 5 weeks.
Wow, that's incredible. And now you've got a big name and you can sort of pick and choose. Do you still get 5 weeks?
Sometimes there have been a few that I've gotten more time, but I wind up obviously still in a panic at the end. And even if I'm given, there was one project where I had about 12 weeks. I had basically 3 months. And I spent the first month doing nothing but recording new sounds and then turning them into playable sample banks, right? Which I always try to do at the beginning of every project, is make a new kind of toolbox of things that are just for that project. But of course, when you know that you could do the thing in 6 weeks, and you've given 12 weeks, then you're going to spend the first 6 weeks making new samples and making your template just amazing and perfect, so that then you can fly through the second 6 weeks with maybe a little less panic than before. Of course, TV is very different. It's a week. You basically have a week.
So question from Dr. Synth from earlier. So what's the difference? TV's outside of schedule and quantity. I mean, aside from the deadline, are there a lot more tweaks? I mean, are they editing to the last minute and they're asking you to make changes a lot more? Or
on film, a little bit more flexible, and they might have some changes and edits. But mercifully, it's usually like, we trimmed 8 frames from this edit and we moved this scene later. Right. But it's never a total restructuring of stuff. On television, never. By the time I see the thing and we do the spotting session, that's it. And it's not going to change because there just isn't time.
That's back to the publishing deadlines again, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's just you just can't afford to do that. Wow. Well, it's absolutely fascinating. Get any more questions in the chat, just fire away. We're going to do a little bit of a quiz here. I have a feeling this may be reasonably new to Charlie, but I think our English eccentric sensitive humour that's going on. Loullamae is with me, so let's see if I can get her on camera. Can you sit up for a second? Right, this is Loullamae's 9-year-old quiz, or 9-year-old Loullamae's quiz.
Hi, Loullamae.
Hello.
Which is a big hit amongst the chatters. So the chat guys are going to, and girls are going to have a crack at this as well. But there's about 5 questions, and I think the most anyone ever's got, I always ask you, there's 3 now, isn't it? Did it go up to 2.5 or 3? 3. Inky the cat, who is amazing, and also she's moderating the chat as well. So
I thought people were tying with her.
yeah, Inky and somebody. Oh, I should have a leaderboard. I'll get that sorted for next week. That's terrible, isn't it? Imagine if you got 3 and you're not in that list. Someone will tell us in the chat. So 5 questions, I think, today. They're really hard, but if you get 4, you will be in the lead of absolutely everything. So let's just get rid of that.
There's 7 questions.
But there's a bonus one and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So hold on tight just 1 second. Let me get rid of that. That for a second. And right, stand by everybody, because here we go. It is a quiz time. Okay, eyes down for question 1.
When I went for a checkup for my ears this morning, what did the doctor say I had in them?
Unicorn dust from your unicorn hair.
Not
No?
far off. Not far off. God, I think that almost works to half a point, because it's equally as abstract. It is a bonkers. He was a great doctor, wasn't he? He was like, oh my God, what have we found in here?
What was it?
So hold on, let's wait for the chatters to catch up, because there's a delay on the chat here. Cheese, custard, glitter, your fingers, ooh, M&M's, fairy dust, wax. Well, yeah, obviously. There were 2 things. So either of them will do gold. I wish. Fingernails, yeah. No, we've had a bit of a wax problem, but the good news is that the hearing has improved. The wax has gone away. A spider is one of the closest. It was a spider, wasn't it? A spider, yes. Absolutely. Well done. So Fabian Cortes gets the spider. There was one other thing. Yeah, he said, I've never seen this before. You got a spider. We're going to have to take you to the big machine, see what happens. What was the other thing?
A jellyfish.
A spider in one and a jellyfish in the other. So thank goodness that doctor had it all covered, right? Amazing. Oh. All right, here we go then. Eyes done. Oh, yes. Okay. So is this an impression? All right, so this is, I have to zoom in on you. This is an impressions round, okay?
Uh-oh.
So Loullamae is going to do an impression. And
Who is this I'm doing an impression of?
Or almost what is this I'm doing an impression of? Okay, that's it. That's all you're going to get.
Your disgruntled and disappointed house cat who wants to be fed.
My gosh, that's close. I reckon you get half a point for the first 2 together to give you a point. That is so close. I can't believe this. What have we got? We've got, I think Flying Saucers and Bombay Potatoes are still on the ear question, to be fair. Yourself, Daddy, smiley face, not me, a puppy. There you go.
But what type of puppy?
What type of puppy? I can't believe you said.
I said house cat because that's the face that our cats make when they want to be fed in the morning, and they're disappointed that we haven't jumped out of bed and fed them.
I'm going to give you half of the unicorn and half of the dog, so you're on 1 point because
Excellent.
Both of them were so in the ballpark. Any ideas on what particular dog? I can make it easy, I think, and actually show you one, but you may not. I guess if you know your dogs.
Wait, I could do the ears help.
Yeah, they do. They do. Let's see. Okay, so let's give it a go with this.
Aw.
That's the dog. Any ideas on breed?
Is that a French
Whoops.
bulldog.
It is a French bulldog. You're right.
Yes.
Fantastic. I think David got that as well in the chat because I was too busy finding pictures as we went. A Basset Hound, a puppy, King Charles Spaniel, new puppy. Yeah, we had a chat about. Well, Loullamae is absolutely desperate for a dog, and so the previous couple of streams we've kind of been talking about what kind of dog and whether it would be okay to get one. She sent me this lovely note, things to do to help look after a dog. And so it was like take it on walks and bike rides and feed it. And I know in 5 years' time I'm going to be the one taking it on the walks and the bike rides. Not at all? A leopard skin collar. Actually, while I think of it, just while we're on this slightly bizarre tip here, hold on. I found an old picture of Charlie when he was in Nine Inch Nails. And I was trying to work out what dog Charlie would be, and there you go. And you see, because if you look at both of them side by side, you see, there you go.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. That I have to say, that is a super cool pic as well from back. Was that 9 Inch Nails time?
that was just after I left the band. I think that's in the house that I went to in Hollywood just after, like around 2001 or so.
Oh, nice. Absolutely. So that was the best thing. But that's actually a pit bull. I didn't realise. They're pretty hardcore, harsh animals, yeah, which I don't think you're allowed them in the UK. He's got that kind of slightly moody look. Okie doke, eyes down. There's another one coming up. Here we go. If I can find the right button to press. Here it comes.
Whose birthday was it yesterday?
Well, it wasn't yours,
Nope.
and it wasn't Dominic's.
Nope.
No. So I'm gonna say, was it Hermione Granger's birthday?
No. You were closer before, actually. You've almost
Mommy's?
got it. No, you almost got it on a previous question, though. Funnily enough.
Oh, someone got it!
Ah, your cat, Native VS, was in there. Well done. Frank the cat was 17 years old yesterday.
Wow.
So he's just amazing, I think. Oh. I just said the bonus question. Oh, no. Oh. What an absolute idiot. Oh, sorry about that.
I know the answer to the bonus question. He's 17.
Yes! How amazing. Oh, sorry, I gave it away. But happy birthday, Frank, who's 17. Good job we got an extra question there to go. Let's do that one. Yeah. Okay, we're going to do one more, and then as time is running up, there is an extra special question, which is a bit of a life dream for me. So let's go with that one there. Which let me find the jingle again. Here we go. All right.
How many screws are in this glass?
485.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. It's not quite right, but it's definitely within the tolerance, I'd say, for a right answer. Let's see if anyone gets closer. That's brilliant. That's like unbelievable. So you've actually got 2 out of all of that.
Someone said 0. How are there 0 in these?
There's a lot. They're modular, so you would probably know. I guess that's why you know, Charlie, because
They're these, aren't they?
They're actually nylon versions of them. The Nurlies that you've got there, right?
Ah, yeah.
So these are nylon Nurlies. I don't drink them. They're tiny. They'll go down your throat.
They'll go in your ears too.
Oh no, I don't want to join the jellyfish. 499 by David Serchek is also very, very close. Let's see if anyone comes up with
I thought
even
that
closer.
was the answer.
It's not, but I'm gonna give it to Charlie because he was definitely close enough. Let's have a look.
Have you actually counted them?
Yeah, I did. 493. No. Close, Jen. Poor Charlie's thinking, I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to talk about synths. 500. All right, the answer is 498.
Oh, I was close.
So you were so close with 485. You definitely get the point for that. And still no one quite there because the chat is delayed. All right, so
Someone was one in
yeah. I mean, but after Charlie said 485, it's like it's close enough for everyone else to work out what's what really. So you've sort of given it away. Right, it's always been my dream to ask a member of 9 Inch Nails to name a cuddly elephant.
That's not the next question.
So it's just a life moment. Can we jump to that though? Because we're a little slow. So.
Do we have a picture of the elephant, or do we have the elephant
We have
itself?
the actual elephant in real life. I also lined up a picture of the elephant, so let me just see, because just in case it wasn't going to be clear enough. We're backstage. We got a picture of the elephant backstage at Clown Fest.
Nice.
So
let's see. Well, he looks too friendly to have a name like Doombringer. So I think, but he almost looks kind of, I don't know. He looks a little bit French, so I'm going to say Henri, like Henry, but in French.
Henri. I like that. Yep. I like that. So open to the chat as well. I mean, to be honest, if a member of 9 Inch Nails and an amazingly epic film score producer names an elephant, you go with it. But Loullamae did say that she could override all final decisions as well.
Of course.
Henri.
You need to put the chat on.
Oh, yes, sorry. I flipped away from the chat briefly. So let's go and have a look at what else is coming in. We have Blue, Flobby, Stompy, Nin, Elephinios, Henri. Well, actually, how bizarre. Henri. Oh, like the hug. Okay, he must have heard you, Paul Arthur. Yeah. Henri, c'est le bon nom. That means Henry is a good name. Henri. My French schoolboy stuff. Grayskull. Hello, Mr. Conk. I guess the thing to do is to go over this afterwards and then announce the winner, or announce if Charlie got it in the next stream. We'll keep them coming in. Or
It's
have
a
you decided?
girl.
Oh, it's a girl.
Oh, it's a girl. Oh.
Oh, you could have mentioned that earlier.
Well, yeah, then Henri is not going to work.
Nor is Mr. Conk, to be honest. All right, back to the drawing board, everybody.
Let's see. Edith.
Oh, I like that. What's the...
It's a bit frumpy, but, you know.
Edith the elephant. How's that gone down? I know that face. That's a baby
it's
face.
not winning any prizes.
Elaine, Henrietta, LFM, Mrs. Grayskull. Yeah, that'll do. Karen. I think we'll come back next week. How about that? That's probably the best bet. Tess. Oh, Inky said Tess. That's a nice name. Tess the elephant. Does that get it for now? Inky the cat. Thank you so much. How can we possibly continue after that? Elisa's a nice one as well, actually.
Now I'm just deciding on Willow or Tess.
Willow or Tess. So was Willow the one that you had earlier then?
Yeah.
Okay, so Willow or Tess, and we'll announce the results next week. Charlie, thank you so much.
We'll
It's
do
kind
the
of
dog thing. We'll do like Willow so people can vote Willow.
Oh, do a poll. That's a
Yeah.
good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. I might be able to just do that. I'll tell you what, we'll do it next
There's
time.
one more question.
Okay, one last question, and then I'm sure Charlie has stuff to do.
What did I see at the theatre on Tuesday?
Paw Patrol.
No, it was theatre, not cinema. But it's,
Oh, at the theater. Oh.
No, I said theatre.
yeah, you did. No, it's all right, because Paw Patrol's a cinema thing, so I was just trying to narrow it down. Wrinkled Tallulah. It's a new one. It's a children's book.
Oh, man.
Yes, the theatres are open in the UK, Sasquatch. It's very,
It was
very,
in London.
It was in London, yeah. Rocky Horror, nope.
I'm not up on the latest in
I don't know if it's
theater productions
crossed
that are
over
compatible
to.
for.
Do you know David Williams over there as a children's book writer? Okay, so that's not going to help. But it's a David Williams book, so we'll forgive you that one.
I've drawn
totally
a blank.
Forgive you that one. Yeah.
I think it's going to have to go to the chat.
To be honest, a score of 2 is epic. I mean, only Inky did the 3, so you won in my book. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. No. Cheers, Robar. Thanks for coming out. Gangster Granny. No, but almost. Mega Monsters, the play. It's not that one, is it? I'm trying to think what it is. It's very close, though. It's not Mega Monsters, the play.
It's this one.
That's right. It begins with a B. It was Billionaire Boy. I don't think anyone's going to get it. Mega Monster. So it's a new book. It's called Billionaire Boy. Boy in the Dress. No Sasquatch, but it has boy in the title. Epic. Thank you so much, Loullamae.
Thank
what
you,
a
Loullamae.
wonderful thing. Thank you so much for coming on board. I feel like we should have you on to ask you more synth stuff. I'd love to talk about the modular side of things as well, actually. Maybe if you fancy coming on again,
sure.
Or if you've got another 5 or 10 minutes just to tell us about how the modular fits in with. Yeah, that would be amazing if you wouldn't mind. I was fascinated. We don't normally stop here, but I was really fascinated about how you'd use modular when you're making a film score, because you could just end up disappearing off into a big old rabbit hole, right? Or are you using it more like an effects rack? Or, I mean, do you have something in mind?
I do. I mean, I kind of have a narrow range of stuff that I use the modular stuff for, and there's kind of 2 sort of categories that are applicable to the scores that I've been doing recently. And the first would be sort of rhythmic, pulsy type of things, those type of sounds that you can't quite tell if it's a drum or a synth bass. And so for those, whenever I'm using the modular, I've already spotted the film and sort of done a wireframe version of the score. In other words, I have all of the sequences laid out as projects in Logic for each of the cues, and I've more or less decided what the tempo will be, usually just by listening to click tracks and some sort of scratch track against picture to make sure that my tempos and meter changes and everything lines up the way I want to picture. And then before I've actually started in earnest to write the music, but I have an idea for what the sort of sonics and the diameter of each cue wants to be, and I have my tempo maps already set up in Logic, then I can go and do this a pass of just recording pulse type material, whether it's actual bass lines or just percussive bubbling 16th note kind of things, and I'll record those into these empty wireframe versions of each of the cues. And then later, as I develop more of the music around them, I can edit them, chop them up. If there's a bit that's really great in one cue, I might be able to extract some of that audio, put it in Ableton Live to manipulate its tempo and pitch to use that one piece of audio in a few different cues to add some consistency. And then the second category of stuff that I use it for is sort of evil drones and distant seagull cry type of material.
Wow.
Where I do have one of the old Dupfer ribbon controllers, and I also have a Haken Continuum, which is not in the shot right now, but with the CV box for it. So I'll use usually a wavetable type oscillator like the Synthesis Technology Cloud Terrarium, or a Industrial Music Electronics Piston Honda, which is not in the rack at the moment. It's over on a shelf here. And I'll set them up so that the ribbon controller goes through a CV quantizer to constrain the pitches to scale, and then through a lag processor so that I can still have slippery, glidey sound or pitches that will then be pushed to the quantized position, but they won't snap. It's not going do-do-do-do-do. It's sort of the same kind of trick that I used to use when using a theremin live with 9 Inch Nails, where I would run it through an auto-tune rack unit, but with the glide time turned up so that you were only permitted 2 or 3 notes within an octave, but it wouldn't snap to them. It would gradually pull you towards them.
Right.
So you could still have wiggly, drifty pitch effects.
Yeah.
But then you'd be pulled into tune.
Nice,
So
which
I
you
use
can't
that-
do on other stuff, right? You just can't do that to those kind of
It's
settings.
difficult to do it with soft. It's so much quicker and easier for me
Yeah.
anyway to just do that on the modular. I have pitch quantizers and lag
Totally.
processors. So I'll set those up and maybe use like the IntelliGel TetraPad, which is a little 4-slider kind of touchpad controller.
Cool.
Use that to squidge through the wavetables while using the ribbon controller to do pitch. And that way you can create everything from evil, girthy drones that have some uncertainty in the pitch and some wavetable motion, all the way up to little delicate, tiny wisps of high-frequency seagull cry type effects, basically.
Awesome.
And it's really effective for that kind of stuff. And as with anything on the modular, once you run it through mutable clouds or mutable beads, then it becomes magic.
Yes,
So
yeah, absolutely.
That's usually the final step in the chain.
I'm really interested that you're using Logic, which is great. I use it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose it lends itself to that linear kind of writing process, I guess.
Absolutely.
And also about building the tempo maps. So do you find that generally there are tempo changes, as in click, rather than now we're going to slowly speed this thing up over a course of period of time?
A bit of both. I spend an inordinate amount of time building tempo maps, even for cues that are floaty and that don't have a defined rhythm, because I want things to be symmetrical, and I want it to never feel as though a piece of music was cut off before it ended because the scene ended. So even if something's going to be floaty and just have a few ambient swirly tones, I will take great care to make sure that my underlying tempo map and meter changes and everything in Logic are exactly 8 bars for the section from when the door opens until the gun goes off, or whatever it might be.
Gotcha.
So that then once those frameworks are laid out with precision and accuracy against what's happening on screen, then it becomes so much easier to color in the pictures. It's sort of like the difference between being an abstract painter faced with a blank white canvas versus being a kid at the Chuck E. Cheese pizza parlor and being given a coloring book. If you have a good tempo map and meter map, that's like the black outline of the picture of the clown on your placemat at the pizza restaurant. And all you have to do now is decide whether his nose should be orange or green. The size and shape of his nose has already been decided upon. So to me, that's the tempo map and the meter map. And getting that nailed down first makes the rest of it fun. Then it's...
Totally. There was another great comment. It might have been the same Pensado thing, which was like making I say pop music in the broader sense. Running a 9 Inch Nails tune was a bit like painting a perfect picture where you had to get the nose right and stuff like that. And then moving into film scores became a lot more abstract and a lot more freedom, I guess, involved to allow you to do what you do. But giving that framework, because I wouldn't know where to start. I don't do film scores particularly, and it's the idea of a 2-hour film sitting in front of me with no sound on. It was I'm sure it's incredibly scary for you, actually.
It's always terrifying,
But building that map does actually introduce enough of an organization to allow you to start, which is an incredible thought.
And it's a way to start work on the thing without having to immediately decide on and find the most epic chord progression in history. You are working on it, and you're putting in thought and labor, but you're not yet at the point where you get to totally ruin the film and your life by choosing the wrong set of notes. So there's still this wonderful potential that this thing's going to be fantastic, and you can chip away at it. I guess it's like sure there's a million analogies behind a sculptor who says, the sculpture was already inside the piece of marble. All I have to do is chip away the parts to reveal it. So building a precise and accurate tempo map, much like building a template in Logic with all of the sounds that you want to use for that project, those are ways to be, quote, working on the thing without facing the horrible demon of what's the music going to actually do. But those efforts, whether it's building the template or spending a week recording weird seagull cries on the modular, which you can then distribute throughout the score. All of those things are ways to reduce the panic level when it comes time to actually pick that epic chord
Awesome, thank you.
progression or whatever
That's
it might be.
absolutely fascinating and enormously useful, I think, for people watching. It gives it a real way of approaching it, whether it's a 2-minute film or whatever. One last question from a friend of mine called Rob Fat Dust. Do you use a Lyra 8 or a Pulsar 23? It sounds like it would be right up your street, that kind of kit.
I do. It took, I don't know, 18 months or a year or something to get the Pulsar, but I finally got the Pulsar. I haven't deployed. I got it too late to use it on this last Saw movie, but it will be making an appearance rapidly because I think everything that Vlad does is, I mean, he's the guy, the most punk rock and future. I mean, I put him up there with people like Reed Ghazala, who basically discovered circuit bending and who, through his Incantor, those modified speak and spells that we all got back in the 90s. You know, Vlad is really one of the most out there characters, but at the same time, one of the most forward thinkers in instrument design. And I have a Lyra. I have which I just got recently, so it hasn't been on any scores yet. I do have a Pulsar, which again hasn't made it onto a score yet, but will. I also recently got Divina, which is the 2-stringed violin-ish, ethnic violin type instrument that he made, which is fantastic for making scrapey, scary, violin-esque horror type textures. And I'm on the list for Enner, which is that touch-sensitive device that they've just introduced or announced. And of course, the email reply from me saying, put me on the list for the Enner. Yes, the list is already quite long.
I think they're suffering from chip shortage, the same as everybody else as well at the moment. So the list is also longer than it should be whilst they're sourcing all of their bits, is what I heard. But
I love what Soma Labs do.
100%.
And so glad that they're not laboring in obscurity off in some dusty corner, but that they've found a worldwide audience for their work, and just
100%.
2 thumbs up for Vlad and the whole crew at Soma.
Absolutely, and the same from all of us, because it's that punk ethic is right. Actually, I never thought of it like that. They're absolutely one of a kind, incredible people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been so incredibly interesting just to hear about stuff. I mean, you're a unique kind of person with the skill sets that you've had going on. You're probably a one-off. So it's absolutely fascinating to hear the story about the whole thing. So thank you so much for wanting to come on, which is brilliant. I hope you don't think this was all a little bit facile in places. It was absolutely brilliant to have you on board. And
I love talking shop with like this because in the course of figuring out what I'm going to say to answer a question, I often helps me to crystallize my own ideas. So it's helpful
Fabulous.
to me too. You know?
And we got the name for an elephant, which is obviously a life goal for me. So thank you so much. I'd love to have you on again soon, anytime you want. If you've got anything that you want to promote or anything to talk about, just shout again. We'd love to have you on as well. And thank you to everybody in the chat. See you all again next Sunday. Please do click that like button. I can see there's more people than likes. So let's go for that if you wouldn't mind. And see you all next Sunday. Keep a lookout for new videos coming out. And thanks once again to Charlie Clouser, our amazing, amazing guest. See you all again soon. Thanks a lot.
Connect so with the herb pipe, link up the harmonized, left the termite. But beyond obsolete blessings, a birthright. We live a life which a lot more in us are worldwide. Cosmic love, energy, I go herbicide free, organically, me say worthwhile. Watch the way one of you change her points in terms of definitions and some termites. Yes, I check the eye. One side is defined by one side the other. I am an ideas man. I assign too much of the qualities of my child. Who's we if I'm talking like this? Who of me?